Tina McElroy, Ansa, and welcome to Two Old Chicks Who Know a Lot of Shit, episode 6. My podcast co-host, Wanda Lloyd, you know Wanda, is here with us.
Hey, Tina. Hey, look, we're still standing, huh?
Episode 6, and we are rolling.
Yeah.
Hey, don't discount Two Old Chicks, okay?
That's right.
Yeah, we are still standing, Wanda, and I'm glad that we are. So let's get right to it. We want to drop some wisdom, and we want to get into the conversation.
Okay. So today we're going to talk about something that Tina and I know something about. We call it rocking our naturals. Yes, we're talking about Black women's hair. And we have a guest tonight on this podcast, someone who broke those hair barriers as a television anchor woman decades ago. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah. Wanda wrote this for me. She said, this is what she thinks I sound like. Woo, child, it's going to be good, Wanda. That's what I sound like. But we do know from our lives how important hair is to women of color and Black women. And it's still a hot topic for us.
Yes, it is. But first, it's time for us to check in. This is our regular segment where we share something from one of your post-its, and I share something from my calendar. So let's get started. You go first, Tina.
Absolutely. Okay, my post-it this time is kind of a flashback from the past because it reminds me to prepare for a virtual book club event I'm having with the Telfair Museum in Savannah, Georgia, in which we will be discussing my very first novel, Baby of the Family. It's indeed my baby. I always think of it as my baby. But what strikes me about this post-it reminder is that it's a reminder to stop for a while and appreciate what I've done. That baby was published more than 30 years ago, Wanda. An entire generation has grown up since my first reading of Baby of the Family. And here we are, 3 decades later, still enjoying the lives of Lena, the baby of the family, and the McPhersons, her family. You know, I'm really blessed.
I've been with you on that journey for 30 years, Tina, more than 30 years. So congratulations on that milestone of all 5 of your novels in that 30-year period. I'm happy to say that I have a signed copy of all 5 of your novels featured proudly on a shelf in my living room. They have their own bookends. So sometimes this is a conversation when people come visit my house. I had company yesterday who stood in front of those books and went, "Oh my God, I remember, Tina, I think I've read all these books." Mm-hmm. I've heard people say, "Oh, you really do know Tina McElroy."
and tell them that all those books are first edition hardbacks. I made sure that was true. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. In the last episode of Two Old Chicks, I talked about the circle of life and how all this at the same time, we seem to sometimes deal with the various life events that can be happy and sad at the same time. For me, one of those was that we were about to have a celebration of life for my aunt, 93-year-old Terry Springer Walker, who was a legend as one of the first dark-hued models with the Ebony Fashion Fair back in the 1950s and 1960s. Tina, when I went up to Ohio for her funeral, I learned so many things about this legend, but one thing stood out to me, and that is that that fashion fair put chocolate brown Terry Springer in some very bright colors. Mm-hmm. In one of the tributes last week, someone mentioned this. She said, when Terry Springer came out on the runway, she wore outfits that were gold and yellow and green and other bright colors, which told us that as a dark-skinned Black woman, it's all right to wear bright colors. Mm-hmm. That just stuck in my mind from the many comments about her, because I grew up being told that I shouldn't wear bright colors. This mostly came from my grandmother, whose skin was darker than mine. And so I am grateful for this lesson from Terry after her death, as it was told to us last week, because she set the standard for how high fashion looks on the bodies of women who are Black and beautiful.
Oh, Wanda, I so remember your Aunt Terry before I even knew she was your aunt, but I just found out. Her appearance on the runway and in Ebony magazine caused a rumble across African American communities. I remember my mother and her friend Miss Austin. They were both light-skinned Black women talking on the phone about how beautiful and stylish she was, and how they always put suits on her because she looked like she might be able to strut suits. It changed things for everybody, not just dark-skinned girls, which it had its most impact on, but even everybody. The sense of inclusiveness is wonderful.
Yes, she did. She changed things a lot. And thank you very much.
Many of our listeners know that African American women are really particular about our hair. It's been a hot and sometimes painful topic for us since the 1700s in Louisiana, where they actually passed a law that Black women had to cover their hair with a head wrap or a tignon to keep from attracting attention. And we went all the way through the times that we've seen the offensive caricatures of Black women and what their hair looked like and what their facial features were, and all the rest. We went right all the way up to the present time with that question that we all get: can I touch your hair?
Well, the answer on that is always no for me and for my daughter, who many people tried to touch her hair and her braids when she was in school. It's always no.
The answer is always, I thought Wanda was going to say, the answer is always no. No, 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 no. That's what she usually says. Now with MSNBC's Joy Reid rocking her braided styles every night, and other visible print and video journalists such as Hannah Nicole Jones sporting all kinds of wild red crazy hair that I just love in a natural style. It's natural almost to see Black women in the public eye, and it's taken for granted that they have their hair in natural styles. However, it's not always been that way.
You're absolutely right, Tina. And we're about to have a conversation today with someone who broke barriers in her own career many years ago when she started wearing natural hairstyles at a time when it was frowned upon, sometimes forbidden in work contracts by work bosses. Our guest is a legend in television news. I mean, she is a real legend. Yeah. It is my pleasure to introduce Monica Kaufman Pearson, someone who has led a distinguished career in journalism. And in 1975, Monica became the first African-American and the first female to anchor a daily evening newscast in Atlanta on WSB-TV. Along the way, she received more than 33 Emmy Awards, and she is also well known as a humanitarian in the Atlanta community and beyond. Monica was born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky, and she earned her BS degree in English from the University of Louisville. Since she retired in 2012, she has stayed busy. Do we know anything about that, Tina? Staying busy and retired?
Exactly. We're two old chicks who stay pretty busy.
In 2014, at the age of 67, she graduated with a master's degree, magna cum laude, from the University of Georgia, Grady College of Journalism and Mass Communications. Yeah. And she's still speaking and emceeing at events and on radio and TV. When I was just a few years into my own newsroom career, we started hearing about this woman in Atlanta who, as I recall, showed up on the anchor desk wearing her natural hair. No perm, no straightened hair, just the beautiful natural hair that God gave her. That was a time when most of us, even in newspapers, where it really didn't matter so much, we're still at the mercy of our bi-weekly trips to the beauty parlor to get relaxers and touch-ups and straightening combs and all that stuff. Monica, we are so glad to have you here to share your story and join us in this conversation. We're so glad to see you.
Oh, Wanda and Tina, thank you so much for inviting me. This is going to be fun because, to me, hair is nothing but an accessory. And just like you change your jewelry. Yeah, you change your jewelry, you change your makeup. Why not change your hair?
That's right, Monica. This is Tina. Oh, it's so good to have you on the show. Thank you so much. We're really honored to have you here.
Well, thank you.
So let's get started, Monica. As I recall, for many years, UTV people had things in your contracts like how you would dress, your makeup, and your hairstyles, like you said, accessories. We never had to think about those things in print journalism, right, Tina?
No.
Not really.
Especially if we're working from 4 to 1 at night on the
I know
content.
that's right. Yeah.
Well, that was never
Monica,
that was never a problem. That was never a problem.
Did you talk to your news director or producer at WSB before you came out, so to speak? And I really mean that in the way of hair, as a natural woman, or did you just do it? What did that look like?
Well, first of all, I started a newspaper. I worked for the Louisville Times. I went through the summer program for minority groups in 1969. That was the first year that they did print at Columbia University. In the first year after the riots of 1968, they did television, and then in 69 they did print. So I started in print. And even in print back then, wearing your hair naturally in a newsroom in the Louisville Times would have caused heads to turn. Because, even though Black was beautiful, it was like your hair isn't. So in order to not be a problem in the newsroom, you straightened your hair. Well, when I moved to television, I kept that same, quote, middle American look. And then one day, literally on the news, I went on vacation and I came back, and I'll just be blunt, it was hot as hell. And I had been on vacation, did not have time to go to the beauty shop. That's a lie. I could have gone to the beauty shop. I just decided I'm going to go in with my natural hair and see what happens. Now, mind you, Jocelyn Dorsey, who was the first Black woman anchor in the city, still says to this day she didn't get the job I got because she was wearing a natural and refused to give it up.
Wow.
I didn't know that when I got the job. So when I first started at WSB in 1975, I had a nice little bob that was straight. But then I went on vacations a few years later, and I came back with natural hair. Mm-hmm. Can I tell you the hue and cry that came from not only white people who asked me when was I going to put a bone in my nose? I was so glad we didn't have social media back there, because I probably would have been just crucified. Right. But I had Black women calling me, and remember, this would have been 78, 79, and 80, calling me, telling me what an embarrassment I was, and sending me cards to their hairdressers because, your hair is so nappy. And I thought, what self-hate? But, later on, I changed it only because I wanted to change it. And then I got breast cancer and just cut it all off because I was assumed that I was going to lose my hair, but I didn't. And I will never forget a news director who actually said to me, "That's not attractive on the air." And I looked at him like, "What do you mean?" It takes away from what you're talking about. Oh. I was truly hurt. And he said, "You need to do something about it." So I bought a wig and wore a wig. Can I tell you that some 30 years later, he called me and apologized after he read the Crown Act. And after I did an interview with a reporter talking about how humiliating that was and how it attacked my self-esteem and how I didn't understand that my hair could be so demeaning to him. And he apologized. 30 years later, he apologized. So, when I went on the air, I was really surprised that I got the feedback, particularly, I expected it from white people. I just didn't expect it from Black people.
Monica, I was in Atlanta from like 75 to 79, and I was working at the Constitution, and I remember, you can't even explain what a burst of reaction that happened in Atlanta. And I remember, the newsroom
was a little interested in it, but nothing like the city. And I remembered how, just what you're saying. I heard Black people saying things like that. And I think I may have written you a little note of support. I don't remember, but you know, the reaction was so visceral.
Yes. And you know what's interesting to me now is I run into young women who tell me I was 8 or 10 or 12, and when I saw you on the air with your hair just like mine, and when I saw you were brown just like me, it told me I could do whatever I wanted to do. And to me, it was just a matter of, it was hot as hell and I didn't feel like dealing with my hair.
Now that sounds like a piece of wisdom that we can drop someday, or that you just dropped just now. And I was really going to ask you about younger women, just to kind of bring it full circle. I was at the 2019 convention of the National Association of Black Journalists in Miami. You talk about hot, it was hot. And there were about 24 women, anchors and TV reporters. They stepped outside the convention venue in Miami and they took this fun photo. They were wearing jewel tone dresses and their hair were all kinds of different natural hairstyles. And this was really a statement that says, we are ready to bring our whole selves to the anchor desk. So how proud were you of that moment? Did you see that picture? And what did you think? What did you think? And did that give you any kind of satisfaction, considering all you went through in your own experience?
Absolutely, it gave me a lot of satisfaction, because when you look at the arc of history, it takes that long sometimes for things to be acceptable when people are educated. Now, while this works in your top 10 markets, let's not fool ourselves. In smaller markets, Black women are still being treated differently because of their hair, or told, we don't like the braids, we don't like your afro, put on a wig. I'd rather see you wear a wig than wear your natural hair. Now, in the bigger markets, perfectly acceptable. I smile every time I see Janae Norman on ABC with her beautiful curls. But I go to smaller markets and I talk to young women and they tell me, you know, I wish I could wear my hair like yours, but when I did, my boss told me that it wasn't appropriate. And the line that the old news director said to me, people will spend more time talking about your hair than listening to what you have to say.
So can I follow up on that? Because one of the first question I asked had to do with how that's communicated. Is that communicated by contract, or do they have a conversation when people get hired?
They have a conversation. They have a conversation. They'll call you in. At least I was called in and told very bluntly, your hair is not appropriate for the air. I'll never forget that as long as I live, that, you know, your hair is taking away from what you're saying. Your hair is a distraction. Now, you know, at that time, bouffants out to here on white women. They were going from blonde to brunette. You know, come on. But my natural hair, quote, was a distraction. It needed to be straightened to be acceptable. And I am so happy now that we can wear our hair the way we want to. Now, as I said, in smaller markets, it's still a problem. It really is still a problem. And when you're a starting out journalist trying to get a job, I always tell my girls, and I'll be honest with you, I tell them, if you're going to a market that's below, you know, like 110 and on to 200, you might consider looking in the newsroom to see if you have anyone in there with natural hair. And you might talk to your news director about it. If you want to get the job, kind of test the waters, because some people will not hire you because of your natural hair in smaller markets.
And there's no recourse.
And there's no recourse, which is why the Crown Act, you know, is really important. The problem with that is, how are you going to enforce it? And if you're a young reporter who's just starting in a job, you don't want to sue somebody about it, because then you could be literally
the end of your career. Yeah,
the end of your career.
Absolutely.
So it's like people, you know, like the law, hands-free driving with cell phones, you know, unless you get caught, it's not enforced. So I just worry about my youngsters, and I always tell them, fill out the news director first. Look at their newscast before you go. Look at the Black women who are on the air and look at their hair. If they're all smooth hairstyles, page boys, that tells you the news director doesn't want a natural. And then after you prove yourself and you've got a contract, then change it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, I used to coach a lot of young journalists and college students when I was working at, at various newsrooms and recruiting for my company. And many of them would ask me about things like, how do I dress? How to work? Male too, young men too. I had a young man who had locks in his hair.
Had to cut them off.
And I told him, I said, you need to cut them off, but you have to prove yourself as the ultimate professional first. And then you can sort of ease your way into dressing, in a professional way, but still dressing something that looks like you. Tina and I just did a book last year called Meeting at the Table, African American Women Write on Race, Culture, and Community. I know she's gonna hold it up. I got mine too right here. And several of the essayists who wrote in the book, Tina, wrote about the burden of racism. So this is sort of like the burden of hair.
It's the burden of racism / hair. Yeah.
Well, do you know, every time I see Zachary Quiche on the air with his dreadlocks, he always has them pulled back. You really can't tell that they're locks until he possibly does a profile. But that tells me that even though he is good as what he does, management does not want him to wear his locks the way he probably does it. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but the impression is, I'm sure he doesn't wear his locks pulled back all the time.
Yeah. Right. But they call it a professional. I'm sure you heard that. Well, your natural hair is just not professional. It doesn't look right. It's all of those things. But I was just thinking, Monica, the advice that you give young journalists who are trying to get on there, get into the business, is a very good advice for everybody. Look at the company, see who's in there. Are there any women in charge? Are there any Black women in charge? Are there, did somebody start as a secretary and they allowed her to, move up? Or did somebody start, as an information getter, a fact checker, and they moved up? Those are good questions. That's a very good thing, Wanda, huh? Those are good questions to ask, when you're joining any organization.
Absolutely. It's not just about hair. It really is all about race, but it's not just about hair. And I've actually recruited people where I've sent them across town to another news organization. So just stand in the newsroom and look around and see who you see in charge. And then you come back and tell me if you think you'll have an opportunity to move up in that organization. And that's happened so many times. And I've had so many young people come back and say, you're right. I didn't see anybody in charge. I saw all the people on the fringes, but nobody one of my favorite terms, no one had a seat at the table who looked like me.
That's right. And I think what's important too is not just in hair, it also happens with body size. Until recently, you never saw women who weren't skinny.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be you needed to be that perfect size 8 to be on television. And luckily that has changed too.
I had forgotten that. That is absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And in smaller markets, because I'm down here in St. Simons, so we get Jacksonville and Savannah. And it's true. They're nice. They're really beautiful Black, brown women. And they look luscious on there. They look really good. We have so many blind spots. I hadn't thought about the fact that they were. There is a size.
There was a discrimination.
Too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I will tell you, getting back to Wanda, what you asked, I did have with one of my news directors, he did put into my contract that I could not change my hair without the express approval of management. And that lasted about 5 minutes.
But Monica, it lasted 5 minutes with you, but think about all the other people who didn't have the guts to do what you did, or to carry yourself in the way. that's a burden for them. That is truly a burden for them. Listen, we are coming really close to the end of our time, but I just want to thank you so much for joining us. This has been an inspiring conversation. I'm sure this has been some wisdom that we have dropped on our podcast viewers and listeners. And I just want to thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your busy schedule to come talk to Tina and me, a couple of old chicks who know a lot of what, Tina?
Know a lot of shit. We do.
All right.
Sugar honey iced tea.
Thank you so much, Monica. You know that I love you. I was in Atlanta when he loved you. So I know about loving you. We love you for coming on. Thank you.
Thank you both for having
me.
me.
Very much. Well, we've lived long enough to know a lot of stuff. So we love this last segment. We call it Dropping Some Wisdom. So Tina, are you ready to go first? What's your wisdom this time?
I am ready to drop some very needed wisdom. Wanda, because we're talking about hair on this show, my wisdom this time is do not overpluck your eyebrows. Ladies, do not overpluck your eyebrows at some point during your season years, Wanda. You saw I use season years?
I know you keep using that term and you say you don't like it.
I do it just to make you laugh. And our season years, they will not grow back. Listen to me, they will not grow back. You think it won't happen to you, but it will. My mother, warned me about it, but I didn't listen. And if you have them right now, enjoy your full, beautiful brows. You can use a manicure, you manicure them a little here and there so you don't resemble the wolf man and have a unibrow. But, leave them alone for the most part. They're beautiful. And listen to Miss Tina. They will not grow back.
Tina, you know what, Tina? I never thought about plucking my eyebrows. I'm sorry. I didn't know I was supposed to do that. But I do get them shaped. I'm not going to look like the wolf man. But thanks for that wisdom. I guess that's why I still have some.
Okay. What's your wisdom this time, Wanda?
Okay. I'm sure you're going to remember this one, but my wisdom is I'm 65 and I don't care. So one weekend, when Tina and I were both 65 years old, that was a little while ago, she and her husband, Janae, were visiting us in Savannah. And throughout the visit, Tina and I would share something we were just sitting across the kitchen table talking. And every now and then we would share something that we told someone or mention something we did that was bold and unapologetic. Over and over, we found ourselves saying, I'm 65, I don't care. And after 3 or 4 times of saying this, one of us said, we should do something with this. I'm 65 and I don't care. Now, I'm not sure what Tina did, but I typed my I'm 65 and I don't care and taped it on my computer monitor where I have other notes that I need to see all the time. Sometimes they're passwords, sometimes they're just little things that I need to remember. So somehow this became a mantra for us. I didn't say it to people so much as it gave me permission to say exactly what was on my mind or to do something in a way that others might not appreciate. I just didn't care. So on my 66th birthday, I don't think I told you this, Tina, at the time, but I retyped my note to read, I'm 65 with a plus sign, I don't care. And it's been like that ever since, because we're in our 70s now. To me, this is a reminder that our many years of living gives us the right to say what we want, when we want, and to whomever we want to say it. And you know what? This sounds like, you know what, Tina? I started thinking about this today. This sounds like it could be a book title, huh?
That's a great book title. I'm 65 and I don't care, or just I don't care. I'd buy that book, wouldn't you?
Well, that's it for this 6th episode of Two Old Chicks. Thanks for listening. We hope you'll tell others about our podcast, and please keep sending us your comments and feedback on social media and share our podcast with people in your circle.
Yes, please tell others about Two Old Chicks if you like us. And one more thing, if you have an idea, share it with us. Now make sure you subscribe and share Two Old Chicks on Spotify and on YouTube, where we're trying to get to a special number, so you never miss an episode, and so we know that you're there. Plus, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Two Old Chicks Podcast. We'll see you soon. Take care. Love and peace.
Bye-bye, everybody. Love, love.